Hello, and thanks for coming along to And We Have an Office Dog, the digital agency podcast where we talk to agency owner-directors and learn more about what makes them tick. From the things that make them similar to the things they'd rather have known sooner, where they've had success and where they've learned some hard lessons. All will be revealed with your host, Chris Simmons, the agency coach, and he'll be talking to a different awesome agency person in each episode, asking them 4 questions and seeing where the conversation takes us over the next 25 minutes. Okay, so let us begin. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, voiceover guy. And on the podcast today, we've got Matt, the founder of OKO and recently exited founder indeed as well. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks, Chris. How are you?
All right, thank you. It's a lovely sunny day. Hopefully, you listeners, when you're listening, it's sunny. We're both in a bit of a bouncy mood because of the sunshine today, aren't we?
Always. I definitely don't get fed up when it's rain and drizzle the whole time, but no, it definitely makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So normally at the beginning of the podcast, I give you an opportunity to give the agency a plug, but I think it's probably a good idea, given that you're recently exited, to tell us what you did at OKO.
Yeah, I guess I'm the imposter here. I think you normally introduce it as directors and founders, don't you? Yeah, I have no agency now. So OKO, we started back in the mid 90s. We like anyone doing anything digital then, we did a bit of everything. About 2013, we niched down into monetization, so working with websites that earn money through advertising, and we got a pretty solid name through there, became Google's first UK partners on that side of things, and that's what we did. We help websites make more money out of advertising,
which is what those websites want to do.
Yes, very much so. And then when you make more money, they want to make a bit more again. So the work never ends, but it's good.
I remember we spoke a good few years ago about things around site speed and stuff like that. Obviously, that's a bit of my sort of heritage in the digital space. And I remember we were talking about, an incremental gain in speed and how much money that could make a website owner, and just astronomical at times.
Absolutely. I stole a lot of your ideas and I brought them into our offering. And I guess that was when, probably shortly after we'd niched down really and done the branding change. And
yeah, that's about right.
Around that time where we were trying to figure out, we had this sort of rocket ship opportunity with Google, and we were just trying to figure out how do we execute on this? What is the thing we can sell off the back of this amazing endorsement? Speed certainly became part of it. A lot of it became around managing the ad stack, getting all the right partners in. Obviously Google are the gorilla in the room when it comes to advertising, but they're not the only player in the space. And just sort of building it all out as an overall offering for people.
So in this podcast, typically we focus on what it is that got you to where you are in the agency and things like that. But given that you've exited, I think this is a really good opportunity to have a conversation around things that were successful that have gotten you to that point. Obviously within the bounds of what we're allowed to talk about, because you've got contracts and things like that. So we'll be careful there. So in all of the years, I mean, it's a long time to have been running the agency since the, what do you say, mid 90s, late 90s?
Yeah, it was. I had this strange moment sort of during the last days of the business where something came up regarding an old domain name, and it was a domain name relating to the first website that I built commercially, and I looked at the who is on it and I went, Lordy, that's 25 years ago. It was like 25. Wow. And then I just felt incredibly old. But yeah, so 25 years been making money or making my living online. I suppose I was doing a little bit before that. Quite a long journey, and not a great long.
So 25-ish years. Aside from obviously building a successful agency and sort of exiting, what do you think has been one of the biggest successes over those 25 years?
I suppose there's two parts, two kind of phases to the journey. So for a lot of that 25 years, we weren't really building anything. We were just doing. It was very much what people would slightly dismissively sometimes call a lifestyle business. It was better than a proper job, as I used to sometimes call it. Yeah, we had a team and we had a good reputation, and we'd build web applications and do what has now become called SEO. We'd do that for clients, and we did quite well. It was about 2013 when we had that direction change. About that time, we had that conversation with site speed that really I saw the opportunity to build something that maybe had a bit more value than what we did before. So for the first part of that journey, I would say what worked was just being able to adapt. We had .com crashes and bubbles burst and all the rest of it, and the business changed, absolutely wholesale changes a number of times, and I think to have stayed in business during that is something I'm proud of.
It's kind of adapt or die, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
The Wild West.
How much do we expose here? So we went from being a digital agency overnight to becoming, believe it or not, a Beanie Baby shop.
Really?
Yes. So there we go. This is something I haven't told everyone. You've got an exclusive. So literally, we had we had a client who was they did a lot of selling through QVC and that kind of retail. We built and marketed their website for them, and we just kind of saw this opportunity around this one weird product line they had. And honestly, at the time when the .com crash came and suddenly no one was spending, we just took this tiny little project and blew it up into something else. And it probably wasn't what we dreamt of doing at the time.
I can't imagine so.
But do you know what? It became the biggest earner for a couple of years. Everyone stayed employed, everyone got paid, and fine. We adapted, we changed. And do you know what? I learned a lot. I learned an awful lot about e-commerce by actually running it. And subsequently ended up running, as part owners, doing those joint ventures again on 2 other projects. Later as well. So every turn there's an opportunity to learn something, isn't there?
Yeah. So every time a door closes, a window opens, or something like that. Whatever the turn phrase is.
Known as the Beanie Baby guy after this. Let's not.
I'm gonna make sure we say Beanie Babies, Beanie Babies, Beanie Babies, just for the transcription.
As well, because that was off from that. But collectibles was, it was a bit of a savior for us for a while, but actually an absolute learning opportunity. Learned a lot of skills. We did a lot of e-commerce after that, and having been able to demonstrate that, well, we sold digitally delivered software, which we were really early to that. We were doing that still in the 90s. We did that. We did the Beanie Babies, the Pokemon. We got into watches and jewelry as well, these joint ventures. But then off the back of that landed a lot of e-commerce site builds. Because we demonstrate, look, here's one we've built and we've managed it, and we could really talk the business with.
I think that's quite important from a sales point of view. Lots of agency owners start out because they're great at a specific thing, or they're great at working in an agency or something like that. There's some of the best SEO that I know, and some of the best agency owners that I know are the ones that also have on the side initially on the side their own things. So that's their own e-commerce store, or their own affiliate business, or their own just a blog articles, website things. Those are the ones that really kind of know it and really know it, because there's how many times have you broken a website to know exactly how not to bloody break a website?
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot to running an online business, or running the online for a broader business. And the more we understand, going back to agency hat, as agency people, the more we understand about the business as a whole, the more value we can bring, because we're not just with some theoretical academic possibility for them. We can say we understand how that fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were to go back, you built a Beanie Baby time machine, and you went back, and you went back either right to the start or to the point where you pivoted the agency, the recent pivot, and you were to talk to the younger, more sprightly, probably more head of hair
What are you saying, Chris?
version of yourself.
Definitely hairier. Yeah.
What might be that one piece of advice you gave yourself?
Oh, one piece that narrows it.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many. I think one I'm very aware of at the moment, and I feel, because I've done a lot of navel gazing since exiting. You end up having a lot of discussions about how did you exit with other agency owners, and having conversations around what worked and what didn't. One I'm really aware of is just defining what you do better. And I don't mean that has to be rigid. I think you can still be really adaptable and agile, having things defined. You just have to redefine at points. But at any point, knowing, okay, here's the end point we're all aiming for.
Yeah.
Knowing what we're trying to achieve. Doesn't have to be 25 years ahead. I don't think I would have had a crystal ball for that. But even this time next year, this is why we're working, this is what we want to do, and then breaking that down to, okay, we know where we want to be this time next year. How does that look for each quarter? And just getting focused, and then really importantly, communicating that with the team. I think for a lot of the business, I maybe had the ideas, but for some reason kept them all in my head and didn't maybe communicate that out. And I think once we got that bit right, a clearly defined goal, I'm not saying we always got it right, but we were certainly a lot better at it by the end. Clearly defined goals, everyone understanding where we were heading. Suddenly, everyone's pulling in that same direction. You don't have to constantly micromanage anything because everyone knows what the outcome is we're aiming for.
Yeah, that's the one. I keep coming back to this. I think that's one of the hardest things about running an agency is that you start it and it's all yours. You can see the cash flow coming in and out. You might not necessarily get a handle on how that works. You're trying to sell, and operate everything, and it's really, really hard to give anything up in terms of information or delegation. But as you grow, you kind of get to the point where you have to do it, and that's really hard to get your head out. Get your head out of that I've got to do into I've got to lead. And the leadership piece of running an agency, you do have to get people involved, and they do have to know what's going on. If they know what's going on, then they follow. They know the program of what's happening day to day, week to week, month to month. But they also know the direction that the business is trying to travel in, so they feel like they're part of something a bit bigger than their individual job role.
I think there's two things stopping us do it, though, isn't there? I think part of it is, by nature, a lot of, I'll be nice about this, a lot of founders are slightly controlling.
Oh yeah,
I think
definitely.
We are used to doing things our way, and we certainly are able to do things our way. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got to the point of bringing a team in. So I think part of it can be, a habit or an inclination that we need to break. But I think a part of it's just the time. I think everything is always more urgent than strategy, isn't it? It's never.
It always feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, you never get that. We've got to get this strategy now in the next 2 hours. Otherwise, we lose a client. It's always the thing that can get pushed back, and likewise communicating that out to the team. So there's a number of headwinds that stop us doing that as well as maybe we would like to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Do you think though, if you went back in time and gave yourself that advice though, do you think you'd listen to it? Would you have known it was good advice?
Well, so I just turned 50. So what, 20, 24, 25-year-old Matt, I probably didn't listen to a great deal, to be honest with you, Chris. I don't know.
It sounds reasonable. This is a theme I'm hearing in this podcast, that most people who would have physically seen themselves from the future come back and give themselves advice, Ed said, nah, you're not right.
I see it now being the older and supposedly wiser one that, people occasionally come to. And you have these conversations with much younger founders, and you can see them nodding, and you're like, "Oh, you've glazed over, you're not going to listen." And I completely get that. We have to have a lot of faith in ourselves to start. It's a big leap. It's a big risk. You have to have faith in yourself and belief, and you have to be headstrong and stubborn to some degree as well. So different stages, I suppose.
I think quite a lot of the agency leaders, agency owner founders that I coach and mentor, they have to be ready to ask or ready for the advice. And there's times when people aren't quite ready to listen yet, and that's not their own fault. It's just the right time, and you know when it's the right time to listen to advice because you're ready to hear it. And you can mentor someone down a path that is suitable for them, and they're kind of giving you all the signals that they're ready to listen, and then they don't do it, and it just becomes every time you talk to someone, it's like, how are we getting on with this thing or that thing? Oh yeah, it's still on the to-do list, something came up this week. You start to get the picture of maybe this isn't quite right for you right now. And at a certain point in time, like for me, it was a really hard watershed moment. I was a terrible boss at times, and I definitely apologies to, again, I say this quite regularly in the podcast, apologies to anyone who's listening who I previously employed. As soon as I realized I've got to get out of the way and start listening to advice was the time that I went from being an agency owner to an agency leader, and it was a big difference.
What was your catalyst? Sorry to switch the interview hat around.
No.
What was your catalyst for finding that out and making that change in the way you worked with people?
Well, I did a really stupid thing, Matt. What I did was I set up a web development agency that ran concurrently and separately to my SEO agency, which meant that my brain was context switching between two different sets of teams, two different sets of problems, two different sets of sales, marketing, and financial stuff. So I was basically running two similar but very different businesses across London and Manchester. And at a certain point in time, all of the stress and strain of that made me a terrible person to be around. And I started thinking, something's got to give, and I don't know what it is. And eventually I just thought, I've got to work out what to do here, because I can't keep doing it. And also I can't keep talking to people badly. So I got to the point where I realized I need to get some advice. It needs to be relatively professional. It needs to be from someone who knows the sector. So I found an agency coach to help me through it at the time. And that was the catalyst. Don't end up killing yourself and be hated at the end of it.
You do need to get to those breaking point or close to breaking point sometimes to have these big changes in the way you do things. Yeah,
exactly. So do you think over the course of all the years leading up to the sale and exit, is there something that you think that happened beyond the pivot, where you went into the monetization space? Is there anything that you did in building from that point onwards that really did set you up for being able to exit like you have?
I think by that point I had realized that I couldn't be the center of every decision. And that's a big difference. Building something that can operate, much as our fragile egos as founders struggle with this, that can operate without us and do so successfully is a key part of it. So I came up with a goal a few years back of I've never been much of a one for taking holidays and taking time off like so many people do this.
Yeah.
And I came up with this goal of I wanted to change the agency in a way that I could take a full calendar month out of the business should I choose to.
Yeah.
And I'd had kind of a little weird health scare just before that, which turned out I was told to be nothing. Came up with this goal. Bought a camper van. Definitely wasn't a midlife crisis.
You're painting this as a midlife crisis, but not.
It does sound like it, doesn't it? And it may have been. I thought, well, look, if I can do one, the business really followed a monthly cycle. And there's a couple of key points in that were really stressful. So I thought, if I can get through a calendar month, or we collectively can get through a calendar month with me not being needed, that was a real point in business maturity. And that's something we really aimed at. And I had this vision of, I don't know, I'd jump in the camper van and pot around Europe for a while, which clearly never happened. What did happen, without getting too heavy, is I got really ill, as you know. So I got cancer. That need to have time out of the business suddenly became very rapidly a reality. And not saying it was my awesome planning, because obviously an awful lot of it was the graft and willingness to take extra things on from the team. The business did all right in my absence. We certainly, some of the long-term stuff, obviously got pushed back. Money was being billed. Everyone stayed in the job. I continued to get paid, which is,
that's the important part. Yeah.
Well, huge worry when these things happen to you. So I still haven't got that month pottering around Europe in the camper van. But those changes we put in place in the business, so just things like, let's actually start documenting stuff. Let's have a knowledge base with one single place that everybody knows where to look for something, and at least there'd be a fair chance of them finding it when they go there, and just people being in the habit of adding to that documentation. Though having those processes in place gave us the maturity to do a lot of things, and subsequently had something that was worth buying at the end of it as well.
And so I read a book a long time. I say a long time ago. Like Monday feels like a long time ago to me now. But I read a book called Built to Sell a really long time ago, and it changed the way I thought about the agency as well, in the sense that I wasn't building it to sell at the time, but I thought actually building it to the point at which you aren't involved in it, whether someone buys it or not, is actually a really big thing, because if you can build an agency where you're not really required to be in it and it isn't all about you anymore, then you've made the most out of people have made the most out of the agency, people are generally happy because they're clearly motivated to stay and work hard, and you've elevated people in the business, but you've also afforded yourself the opportunity to put those superpowers to use elsewhere, or just potter around in Europe in a camper van, up to you. But at that point, you've built something which is way more valuable, whether it be bought or not, because there's a lot more. There's a lot more out of it.
Agree. I think I had a couple of people urging me to look at selling the company, or at least consider selling the company, for much longer than I really ever considered it. And my accountant in particular, I was lucky. I had a really good accountant, and who I still have the same accountant, who did a lot more than an accountant role. He was sort of informal financial director. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this, because he want to bill me for that. But certainly paved the way for a lot of that. And when he was encouraging me to, I would often say to him, I can't see a future where I'm selling. And he would say, well, look, you can make a company that's saleable without having to sell it. It's still a better company. And that was certainly, I think I probably expected more to end up owning a company that I was less involved in day to day. That was probably more my goal than to sell. Things change. But that was, totally agree with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, to me, that fits, right? You've built something which you can walk away from and it will still run. You can sell it and it will still run. You can do more with it because you've got more brain space to grow it. And so, however you decide to run your agency, it's probably a good idea to try and build it so that God forbid you get hit by a bus or taken to space by aliens or something like that, it still goes, it still works, it still pays people's bills, it still helps people get through life. It's quite important. So let's say, for example, right now there's normally I ask the question, if there's an agency owner who's just started or looking to start out for themselves, what piece of advice you'd give them. But what about an agency owner that's been building their agency over the last few years, and they aren't necessarily looking to sell, but they've been going for a good 5-10 years? What piece of advice would you give them? They asked, if they asked.
I suppose it depends on what they want to do next. Is the goal to build it and sell it? Is the goal to work less or earn more? Or it's going to differ, isn't it? I don't think there's one piece of advice I'd give to everyone.
So I would argue against that. If I'm going to turn my own question around to me again, seemingly, I would say you're totally right in that, whatever their objective is, that's the advice you would then potentially frame it as. My piece of advice would be seek out advice.
Okay.
And because if you don't know it yet and you aren't asking for advice from your peers in like mastermind sessions or group sessions, or you're not asking for advice from people like yourself who've been there and done it, and then literally gone through to from very beginning to very end, if you're not asking for advice, then you're probably missing out on something. So my advice is to ask for advice.
I'd definitely say that's something that if if I were to go again. Who knows? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm yet to decide. That's definitely something I would do different. So I think I have a tendency to hide behind a spreadsheet or hide behind a database and not talk to people. I think for someone who's been around doing this for so long, there's not that many people in the industry that I'm in regular contact with. There's a small group, but I've never been a big one for events and face-to-faces and all the rest. It's too easy to hide when you work digitally, isn't it?
It is.
I think I've probably in the last year made stronger connections. So it's now, well, we're 2 weeks short of a year since we signed the contract on selling. So basically, since I've sold the business, I've probably made more connections that would help the business. Which partly might be that prioritization and time, but I don't know, just different priorities. So yeah, I definitely would. I think I've had conversations in the last 7 days that had I had a few years ago, I think would have significantly added to what the exit was.
Yeah.
And
that's hindsight for you.
Well, there's going to be a lot of that, I feel. And yeah, I think I definitely spent too long. You know, we were physically located in a bit of a strange place down on the coast. Not that many people in our surrounding area, and I think I personally had a bit of a tendency for, I might say isolationism, but maybe just kind of keeping it to myself and working quietly on whatever we were doing. And I think I would be definitely more collaborative in the way I do this now.
I think everyone's got to find the way that they work, but it is very much based on your own personality, isn't it? If you'd have forced yourself way back then to not behave, you know, to not sit in the office and work quietly, like you say, if you'd have forced yourself not to do that, you probably wouldn't have felt it was right, and you wouldn't have felt quite right.
You know, I would have felt like I was skiving off. So I've got this weird mindset with work. So my first decade or so of working was in the hotel trade. So I did hotel management and chefing prior to that. So working there was being seen to be present and physically grafting. And it's taken me a very, very long time to get out of that. I always had the mentality of, you know, kind of first in, first out, look, be busy. And I think anything that felt a little bit not like work, even if it had benefit, I always struggled to justify a little bit. Things like strategy go aside, certainly things like, you know, building a network that can have massive benefits. Never really felt like, you know, if I stood there with a drink in my hand or a cocktail sausage or whatever you guys do, so I don't know. I wouldn't have felt like I was working, even if I was bringing real value. So I would have always, if I did anything like that, it would be sort of outside office hours, if you like.
Yeah. Fair enough. And so the advice that I would give is ask for advice. The advice that you would give is go and build a network if you feel like you can, I guess.
Yeah, just being around other people. I think, you know, you can call it a network. You can call it seeking advice. You can. But I think just having input from other sources is so valuable. You know, isolationism, I sort of, you know, said jokingly, but that becomes it. If you're not bringing ideas in, it can happen. It's a lot harder to get that broad picture, understand where all the other opportunities are if you're not having conversations. You can do it, but it's a lot of reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a lovely way to end the podcast on, with some great advice there. So thanks very much, Matt, for joining me today.
No, thanks for having me.
And on our next podcast, we'll have a different agency leader to tell us about their story and where they got to and what they've learned. So thanks very much and enjoy listening.